Season. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Brian Wilson.
And joining us on the line right now is Joe diGenova, legal analyst. Joe, good morning to you. Good to have you. I want to start with a little thing that Hillary Clinton said on Meet the Press, talking to Chuck Todd. Listen very closely.
Has the FBI reached out to you yet for an interview?
No, they haven't. But, back in August, we made clear that I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have, and I stand by that.
All right. So, a lot of people making hay out of it. Well, see, can't be that serious. They hadn't even bothered to talk to her yet. I looked at that, I said, that doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't mean much. What do you think?
Well, she's the last person you interview in a case like this because she is the prime target of the investigation. Things are getting curiouser. And by the way, James Comey is not going to interview Hillary Clinton. He's the head of the agency. He doesn't do interviews. He does executive supervision of the agency, so you can forget this nonsense being reported that Comey's going to interview her. He is not.
I dismissed that.
Well, that came from David Schuster, so it automatically falls into the nonsense category.
It is therefore of no value whatsoever. Now, why is what's happening important? There are rules in courts, in the DOJ, and in the Bar Associations that one lawyer cannot represent more than one person, one key person in a case. Now, why is that important? Because Beth Wilkinson, who's a very famous former federal prosecutor who did the Oklahoma City bombing, now represents 4 aides to Hillary Clinton: Cheryl Mills, Jake Sullivan, Heather Samuelson, who did the 30,000 deletions, and Philip Raines. Now, every one of those people worked with Brian Pagliano on the private server. Every one of them knew of the private server. Every one of them used the private server. Every one of them had an unencrypted device using the private server. Which means what? They are not just witnesses. They are what the Justice Department calls subjects. They are people in whom the grand jury is interested. Now, how can one lawyer, Beth Wilkinson, represent 4 subjects? The answer is she cannot. But the Justice Department apparently is allowing it. I called the Justice Department on Friday and asked for an explanation and asked if the Justice Department had changed its policy on not allowing such representations, and they never got back to me. Something very strange is going on here. There is no way that a legitimate investigation allows one lawyer to represent 4 of the key subjects in an ongoing investigation. This is quite remarkable. And once they start the interviews, if she, Beth Wilkinson, is permitted to continue to represent all 4, then it is clear to me that the department has thrown in the towel and is not going to do anything.
Well, one of the things, and that's interesting, and I hadn't heard that take on it. And
it's not just interesting, it's vital.
Yeah, here's the other thing, though. Some of the reporting that came out last week suggested that the fact that the FBI was now beginning those investigations was a sign that the Justice Department had signed off on it, and therefore, at least initially, the Justice Department was not standing in the way of the FBI's probe. Because they could have said, no, we don't want you, we don't grant you that permission, but they had granted the permission to go forward.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that they were never going to say you can't interview people. For heaven's sakes, that would have been, even the idiot Republicans running the Capitol Hill would have done impeachments at that point. This is, of course you have to allow all these interviews to occur. Otherwise, it's a fake investigation. But that said, these interviews are going to occur. We now know that. They've announced it. So how can one lawyer represent 4 of the key people in this case? The answer is she cannot. And so it's going to be very interesting to watch. By the way, let me give an example why that's important.
Yeah.
In Baltimore, Officer Porter, remember, he was given immunity to testify against the other 5 officers?
Yes.
If his lawyer wanted to represent the other 5 officers, the court would say, no, you have a conflict of interest. That's exactly where Beth Wilkinson is now. She's representing Officer Porter, and she's representing the other 5 officers at the same time. This is insanity. Why is the Department of Justice allowing this to happen? It is quite remarkable.
And obviously the concern here, Joe diGenova, is that this one attorney can basically say, all right, let's all get our stories straight.
Collusion.
Yeah.
Collusion, management of a story. The Department of Justice has a responsibility to prevent collusion in any way it can. The courts, for example, if the Department wanted to, you know what it could do? Go to the judge in front of whom this grand jury presumably exists, file a motion to disqualify her. They haven't done it as far as we know. So, the Department will not answer questions about this, which they should.
Yeah.
And so we shall see what happens next.
Something doesn't smell right about that.
Well, thankfully, David Gregory, CNN contributor, I'm sure will do an investigative piece on this
Of
and
his
get
wife.
to the bottom of it. Oh, that's right. This is his wife.
He is married to Beth Wilkinson.
That will be interesting to watch as well. Hey, if I could ask you one other issue about where things stand right now on the Hillary Clinton investigation and the fact that a year ago, based on our conversations, I wrote a post over at IJ Review saying, here are 3 federal laws that it looks like Hillary Clinton could very well have violated. One was the mishandling of classified information. Right. One was the violation of the 2009 Federal Records Act, and the other was a violation of the Freedom of Information Act. Yeah. Here we are over a year later. This whole thing broke, last February, March, right? We're over a year later. Has anything fundamentally changed in our knowledge of this situation that would contradict the idea that she could have violated those 3 laws?
No, actually, all the publicly available information confirms what you wrote, Larry, because remember, Brian Pagliano took the Fifth Amendment on September of 2015 to congressional committees and then to the FBI. He was granted immunity in March of this year. Everything has flowed from that. Now, what that means is it means that Brian Pagliano theoretically committed a series of crimes related to the private server and needed immunity in order to talk to the FBI and the Department of Justice lawyers. Everything that we know now says federal laws were broken. And if the Department of Justice walks away from this, they better have a damned good explanation as to why they're walking away from it. The more you look at the facts, the more you understand how gross the violations of federal law were and how the only way you don't get prosecuted in this case is because you're a very special person with very special friends. If you're John Q. public employee, you're
toast.
Arrested
and
absolutely. You're fired, and you lose your clearances.
Yep.
Well, but we've learned this week, Joe diGenova, that there is a higher standard for a political candidate. That's what I keep hearing from all these smart people in town.
That is correct. These are the same people who say that there will never be charges, and you know what?
Right.
They're guessing, and they may be right. But let's just be very serious here. There is absolutely no doubt that there are multiple prima facie cases of violations of federal criminal laws by Mrs. Clinton, the 4 senior staffers I just mentioned, Mr. Pagliano, and others. The notion that private server in Chappaqua, in its very infancy, the moment of its birth, did not violate federal law because the intention was to prevent disclosure of any information to courts, the people, the public, the press, and the Congress, and to resist subpoenas is just simply unbelievable.
Well, Joe, listen, thank you for staying on it, and boy, I think that's a very interesting analysis. I haven't heard that take. That's why
the conflict.
That's why we have you here.
There's a new rule. It's called the Clinton Rule on multiple representation. It just got established.
Good to know. I'm sure it'll be utilized by other defendants.
Unless you're a Republican, then you get screwed.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye.